Hey, this is Zacklog the Great, and I am here tonight with my friend Nate.
Hi.
He wants me to tell everyone that he's a nice guy. Um,
Tell the truth. Okay.
he said he'd hurt me if I didn't say that.
That's more on brand.
And we are joined tonight by Jeffro. Say hello.
Hey, everybody.
For those of you who are unfamiliar, he is the author of Appendix N, a literary history of Dungeons and Dragons, which is published by Castalia House. So, and an authority on all things pulp fiction. Well, on some things pulp fiction, at least. So, we are getting together tonight to talk about the poem Zothique, by Clark Ashton Smith, and this is the first poem of his I've done. I think I'm going to start looking for others. I kind of liked this one. But what Nate disagrees, we will get to that. One more thing quickly before I read it tonight. We just a quick reminder, if you like my work, if you enjoy these or my other videos, you want to help support me, please go to subscribestar.com/Zacklog-the-great, and you can sign up there anywhere between $1 and $5 a month. And having said that, looks like I will be reading the poem for tonight. And you guys can tell me when it is up on the screen.
Yep, I can see it.
There it is.
Okay. All right. So let me take a drink of water quick before we get this. Okay. Zothique by Clark Ashton Smith. He who has trod the shadows of Zothique, and looked upon the coal-red sun oblique, henceforth returns to no anterior land, but haunts a later coast, where cities crumble in the Black Sea sand, and dead gods drink the brine. He who has known the gardens of Zothique, where bleed the fruits torn by the Simurg's beak, savors no fruit of greener hemispheres. In arbors uttermost, in sunset cycles of the sombering years, he sips an amaranth wine. He who has loved the wild girls of Zothique shall not come back a gentler love to seek, nor know the vampires from the lover's kiss. For him the scarlet ghost of Lilith from time's last necropolis rears amorous and malign. He who has sailed in galleys of Zothique and seen the looming of strange spire and peak must face again the sorcerer-sent typhoon and take the steerer's post on the far-poured oceans by the shifted moon or the reshapen sign. Okay. And that is my contribution for the moment. Jeffro, would you like to be the offer the first comments here?
Oh gosh, okay. Well, I think this one is you know, like I'm infamous for ticking people off online by saying like don't read anything after 1980. This one, I'm going to say that the meaning of this poem is don't read anything after 1940. This is like this really captures the greatness of 1930s weird tales in particular. You can see here, like this just dives headfirst into the superlative, right? You You're once you get a taste of this, you're not going to want to settle for anything less. That's really what's on the tin here. And I'm going to say my sentiments exactly. Just as an example of how the transition to a post-Christian culture literally makes people stupid. It makes them illiterate. It makes them unable to tell a story. I'm going to cite Philip Jose Farmer, also from Appendix N. So, I mean, he certainly has some chops. He has some imaginative capabilities. But when he took up Hadon of Ancient Opar, he took up this little piece of Tarzan lore from Edgar Rice Burroughs, and he wants to take it and run with it. And what does he do in his very first chapter? He introduces this barbarian Atlantean gladiator type character. It would be really great. This is just be a really exciting story. But like the entire first chapter is him thinking about the temple women and what he wants to do with the temple women. You know, that's all it's all like this inward looking, you know, lustful thoughts of this random guy from, you know, from ancient Atlantis, you know. So no. Yeah.
I don't have to like, you know, read of the adventures of some barbarian for that. I can, you know, see that kind of thing in my own head on a bad day.
Right. It's not, yeah.
Or a good day if the kid's home and the wife is.
But yeah, but you know, just touching on, you know, circling back to this poem, you know, I say that all day, every day anyway, but you're looking here, you know, I'm going to say, you know, down there in the third stanza, we've got, you know, the women section there, the wild girls of Zothique, and we get down, there's a reference to Lilith there. You know, even in the 1930s, you know, as wild as the 20s were, and as just as out there as everything was, and as you know, turning and turning on the widening gyre, all that sort of a thing. You know, here we go. We've got in this mythology that he is building here in his short story series. We got here, like, it's anchored in, you know, not just any femme fatale, but like an archetypical femme fatale that's rooted in Christian lore. So, you know, you've got a depth here, you got a mystery, you have a mystique, you know. And I'm sorry, but like people after 1940, they just struggle so hard. They just struggle so hard.
Well, so as I said before I read the poem, Nate does not share a positive opinion of this one. So, would you like to tee off on your take?
Oh, 4. All right. So I read this poem and I'm like, seriously? What it reminds me of more than anything else is if you told, like, you know, a relatively creative high school kid, hey, imagine a place that sucks. Go.
What?
And so they wrote about this place. Like I said, they wrote about this place that is, like, you know, harsh and unforgiving, and the way that it struck me is that it ruins you if you go there. I'm like, oh, okay, so we have Detroit.
Yeah, but I think people who go there try to get out. It seems this one.
No, it just feels inescapable. Not so much that you wouldn't want to leave. It's just that, you know, it's gonna like make it very difficult for the poor maligned bastard who's wound up on its twisted shore.
He who has trod the shadows of Detroit.
Yeah, like I said, he was looking into the future of one of
how
our.
How can I rhyme gunshot wounds into there somehow? I don't know.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can rhyme the phrase "bust a cap in your ass." Ask the gangster rappers. But anyway, like I said, so it's kind of like the whole place just it doesn't seem like a place you should ever go. And it's like, it's not like we're talking about, Solomon Kane or somebody who's there, just doing his thing. It's like, this is just the place. This is a bad place. Don't go here. The fruit is bitter. The women will drive you crazy. You have to face like the primordial, temptress here. And by the way, the magicians are all up about hurricanes, so don't try and sail off. Screw you, you're stuck. I didn't like it. I was like, honestly, it feels like the next stanza should be like, you are all hardy, brave adventurers, and from various parts of the realm you have wound up in this small tavern on the shores of Zothique. What do you do? It sounds like the intro to a D&D game set in fantasy Detroit, and it didn't stick me. I was kind of like, no, this one's gone for me.
Is Clark Ashton Smith in Appendix N?
No, he is not, but he should be.
Okay. So a couple of things. One thing, a note just about some of the terminology in here, because I had to look up a couple of these things myself. The simurgh is a mythical bird. I think I saw him compared either to sometimes to a rock or sometimes to a phoenix. And then the other thing, he sips an amaranth wine, and amaranth is a symbol or was a symbol of immortality. And I do get what Nate is saying, like the kind of cursed sense of this place. Like this certainly isn't a utopia. One other thing, again, a kind of academic note. Zothique actually is the setting of a number of fantasy stories by Clark Ashton Smith. I read one after I started working on this poem, which was The Master of Crabs. That would be I'll come back at least.
You see, you should have left those wild women alone.
But anyway, I may have read others set there, but I don't know off the top of my head. If I had, I didn't. It's been a long time, and I didn't tie them in. But I liked this poem quite a bit because to me, like, this is about 30 lines of poetry, and like it kind of seems like he, in that short a space, like he sums up pulp, sword, and sorcery. Like everything is in there, and like this is Clark Ashton Smith, and it's one of his settings. But what he describes here, that could equally well be Robert E. Howard, that could be Edgar Rice Burroughs, that could be H.P. Lovecraft. Like he really captures like the feeling of that kind of story, very well in a short space, and I found that very impressive.
Yeah, I 100%. That is totally spot on. I'm not an expert on Clark Ashton Smith. I've since 5 o'clock I've read like 3 stories from Zothique. But
none of them involving crabs.
No, I didn't get to that one. But no, his first one, the tone of the Empire of Necromancers, it's Dunsanian, and it's he really tries to go for the King James Bible type of tone, especially the Old Testament. That sort of like drops away. Your last stanza there is referring to the galleys of Zothique. That could be a callback to the Isle of the Torturers. that one's that one it has like it's sort of like similar to the color of space, this kind of weird thing coming out of the sky. Um, and then finally, I looked at the carnal god. This one I would sum up just to give the elevator pitch on that one. That's like, especially taken with the others, you have, like if Fawford and the Gray Mouser like really captures the tone of low level D&D play where people are just in it for the money. This
Murder
one,
hobos!
yes, Clark Ashton Smith captures the sort of the anthropology of your default D&D setting. So what all these gods are that are people worshiping, what the cities are like, what the random king is up to on this random isle. It really, everything here you can just take and sort of flesh out your fantasy world. And there's stuff in every story that you can just rip off completely and just run with.
And so yes, if you are a game master and you're trying to come up with ideas, raiding Clark Ashton Smith is probably not a bad plan. And you can get away a little bit from some of the weird politicized garbage they've painted all over 5e. So
yeah, I'd say he's the missing link. I'd say like you can transition from Dunsany and Lovecraft into Clark Ashton Smith, and from there, it's Smith sort of presages Jack Vance's Dying Earth with these stories. So and for AD&D in particular, AD&D is as Daddy Warpig and Kursova have delved into. That's a post-apocalyptic game, and D&D fantasy. It has some medieval stuff smushed in it, but it's really much more so far future than you would first expect. And dipping back into Smith, you're really going to get that feel, and in the same way that you get from Jack Vance.
Yeah, and the other thing, going to the other stories that are in this setting, Zothique is actually those stories are supposed to be set in a long distant future, and like it's so far away that like some of the continents have sunk, and others have gotten shifted around into a new map, into a new globe, effectively. And I think, and you guys can tell me if I'm seeing this right, or if this makes sense to you. Like the last lines of the poem, on far port oceans by the shifted moon or the reshapen sign. Like he's talking about like the constellations have changed.
Yes, he went the full Thundar the Barbarian on this.
Yeah, that's some deep time.
And so like they've lost all our technology, but like they've brought back wizardry and sorcery. And it's that's the setting. It's also one other thing about this poem that I find interesting, is the way he wrote it. He actually there's this word here, Zothique. Well, how do you say that? How are you supposed to read that? But he tells you by rhyming it in the very next line. And so, like, that's actually a pretty clever trick. Because otherwise it'd be like, is this Zothique? Zothique? No, it's Zothique because it rhymes with oblique.
Awesome.
That is a well-struck blow. I'll give him that one.
So, Nate, were there any other particular problems you wanted to poke at?
I mean, like I said, as a piece, it's fairly well written. I mean, I can't argue with the construction of it. It's executed decently. It's done well. I just don't like it.
I don't want to go there. I'm not saying that.
Like I said, the whole deal is, like I said, I guess the thing is that I don't have the same sort of deep appreciation you guys have for sort of just the weird for its own sake. I'm always like, why?
Right. Well, no, you live in the weird universe, man. You live in a weird century. Everything normal has been subverted, so it doesn't have the charm and mystique that it could otherwise have.
That's actually probably true.
We live in this strange land where men think they are women, and
other people go along with that crap. Oh, and additionally, there's a plague and some murder hornets. Just found out about the murder hornets. This is big news.
No.
My question is, how long is it going to take for us Louisianians to figure out the best seasoning ratio to boil those bastards? Actually, we'll probably end up deep frying those.
Crunchy. Yeah, you could. Well, you also probably want to take the legs off first because those would get stuck in your teeth.
That's called a feature, son. And that's a built-in toothpick. You just.
But I like I said a second ago, I don't want to go to this place, but I would certainly not mind reading a story where like you said, where Solomon Kane gets dropped here and has to righteously slay monsters and evildoers before hacking his way out. I would read that story.
And so, like I said, what I was going to say though is, like sort of this weird it's just for the sake of being weird. I'm like, yeah, okay. But like that book I let you borrow, where like there's like the ancient Indian prophet guy, Indian, like Indian, not Indian.
Feather, not dud. Yes.
Yeah, Feather Indian. He shows up.
To indulge mildly racial stereotypes. I saw another reference for that today. Casinos, not Slurpees.
Nice. Anyway, but yeah, but the part of it where that book took a turn for the weird. I was like, yes, this is actually really good because the whole time the guy's been played up as like he's sort of other. He's not one of our people. Our people have just known him for an improbably long time. He's from before, and he can do crazy stuff. And so eventually you get to see the crazy stuff, like something does to a guy, and you're like, oh wow, okay, that went to a strange place, and it fits with the story without taking it over. It was just interesting. Basically, he cuts the guy loose in time and drags him, drags him into this sort of outer dimension. And then when the guy gets back, he's like anciently old. And so he's everybody sees him. It's been a few days for them, and then this guy comes stumbling out of the bushes and is like, finally, I'm back. And everybody's like, the hell, dude? You've been gone for like a week. He's like, it was very, very well done, very interesting. I don't know. So that's kind of like, I guess I like to sprinkle weird on top of other things, but I don't like to just eat me a big bowl of weird.
Well, but so for those who are wondering, by the way, the book is The Californios by Louis L'Amour. I will say that's the second. I think that's the second full book of Louis L'Amour's I've read. Oh, I just remembered he wrote poetry. I've got to see if I can find some of that. See if I can find anything that fits.
I'll let you borrow one of the volumes I've got. But yeah, in case y'all are wondering, he's definitely not usually the guy you'd find for like fantasy weird kind of stories. He is a Western author. Although he does have another story that I really Actually, it's probably the only one of his stories I've read that I actively disliked. It's called The Broken Gun, and it kind of deals with a bit more sort of weirdness. On the other hand, my very favorite book by him is called The Lonesome Gods, and it has some very strong threads of sort of, weird going through it, but most of that gets explained. But even in the end, some of it doesn't. And he's got this sort of strong tint of these sort of preternatural connections that people will have to the land. Guys will get lost in the desert and be like, wait, what's going on here? And it's like, oh crap, I'm going to die. But then they'll just kind of almost outside of their own volition, just stand up and just start walking and, be like, I don't remember what happened, but, I woke up and, I'm at this hidden water hole that nobody knew about. Things like that, or like, there's just this voice told me, hey, turn your head. And I did. And I found, this path out of this death trap. Good stuff. The man was a tremendously talented author, and can't say enough good about him. But if you don't like Westerns, you're probably not going to like him very much.
I will say, from having read the Californios, if Louis L'Amour had wanted to write horror fiction, I think he could have pulled it off.
Like I said, he came from a different section of pulp.
Yeah. Well, yeah. He probably would have been, kind of classified in, roughly the same way. So yeah, that fits too. So Jeffro, were there any particular points of this poem that you especially liked or disliked?
Well, I mean, it's just I love that he's bringing it all to the table in one poem. We've got the far future dying Earth style setting with the you got the cold red sun oblique, right? So that this is definitely far future with the shifted moon and the reshapen sign. You've got like in the second stanza, you've got like it's very reminiscent, or it presages what Moorcock was going for with Melibene. With that decadent mortal society that you don't really mind gets destroyed. And then
although with probably less cynicism and moral relativism than Moorcock.
Absolutely. And then, but followed up immediately by some of the charm and the horror of A. Merritt's kind of just unabashed, both guns blazing approach to both the femme fatale and the mysterious elfin girl that you meet on an adventure, and finally with galleys and Zothique. It's hard not to think of Conan and Belit, but yeah, it's everything Appendix N all at once, and just no self-consciousness. He loves it all, and you just put it all together, and it doesn't matter where it goes because it's all good.
Well, and another. Oh, go ahead.
It really does just kind of take the whole big bundle and just smack you with it. And I'm like, I know exactly where this guy's at. Okay.
Yeah, he's somewhere in the 30s.
I gotta give him props for that. I'm like, there is no question what's happening in Zothique.
Well, and another thing kind of interesting for me is just kind of technical aspect. If you look at the way the poem is written and the rhyme scheme, it took me a while to notice this while I was working on it. But he keeps the same. Let's see. There's there's 3 rhymes he keeps the whole way through this, and then 1 rhyme that changes for each stanza. And that's actually, like, just in terms of English poetry, that's pretty impressive. English is a relatively rhyme poor language. Like doing coming up with several rhymes for the same thing consistently is it can be difficult for us, as opposed to Spanish or I think Italian, where they have the same, they have consistent word endings, and so it's relatively easy. Oh, I need to rhyme this thing 5 times. Oh yeah, I got it, not a problem. Whereas in English, doing that kind of thing, that takes a good bit of work. But he has Zothique, oblique, beak, seek, peak, coast, uttermost, ghost, post, and I just, again, from a technical perspective, I find it kind of impressive the way he pulled that off as well, which is probably the least interesting thing most people reading this think about. Hey,
Interests
Nate,
me is
I don't know if this is okay for you. We see your whiteboard up in the corner there. Okay, we see about half.
If you want to know what the kids are studying.
Okay, I couldn't quite read it yet, but I know, I don't know. I didn't know if there was anything they were worried about. If you kept your ATM pin up there or anything.
Oh, no, that's where I keep the code to my secret underground vault. I mean, composting shed.
Okay, we'll call David the Good for that one. But
one thing I will say is interesting, kind of about the world he lays out, is that you end up with this, this unnamed stranger sipping a wine of immortality while the gods are dead, drinking heavy salt water. It's kind of like, I guess that's just one reason why this is not a nice place. Humanity has survived and the gods are gone.
I don't know if
I don't see the immortals now.
And I don't know how closely the stories track with this, and I don't know whether they talk about it. It isn't saying that all the gods are dead. It's just saying that there are dead ones, and those dead ones are down in the ocean.
Right, because it's so far in the future, and there's been so many civilizations come and gone. There's not only dead civilizations, there's dead gods too. That's how deep this well goes.
Well, and eventually the leading edge of that red coal of sun will touch them, and then we ain't got to worry about Zothique no more.
And I have to, since we'd already mentioned him, I did find, I don't know what the chronology is between the two of them and whether they knew each other, but you've got dead gods out in the ocean, and that immediately calls to mind to me, that is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange eons even death may die. And
I just realized the visual style that this whole thing puts in my head. I was like, it's killing me. Because I get a mental image when I'm reading this, and what it is all this jagged red and black stuff. And the shadows are super deep. The light is almost painful to look at. Like I said, everything is in tones of maroon, crimson, and ash. And I figured it out. Samurai Jack is set in Zothique.
I was thinking Ralph Bakshi personally.
I know the. Okay, I've heard the name. Who is that? What did he do?
Wizards. He also did.
Weird thing.
Yeah,
that's the one where it's there's a wizard and there's post-apocalyptic Nazis.
Yes, the MacGuffin in the movie is Nazi war propaganda, which can whip the orcs into fighting fury and cohesion. You've got fairies fighting guys with laser rifles. You've got cyborgs teaming up with wizards and elves. It's all out. It's pedal to the metal.
That sounds amazing.
It is a very strange film, yeah.
Yeah, if you want to know why AD&D just it includes notes in the back that says, of course you would want to use Gamma World with this, right? It's because of that movie. There was no sense that you wouldn't want to play everything at once. It's not because not whether it's not whether or not it's a good idea. It's like you can't give a reason why not.
That actually reminds me of some computer RPGs I've played, because there's a few I've played where they tend to where you have all kinds of like legendary monsters, dragons and vampires and whatevers, and then you also have some kind of space aliens and robots, and like what's Might and Magic, I think, is one of them. Like numbers 5 and 6 do that. What else? Wizardry. Some of those games, have that same kind of thing. Again, like the wizards and dragons and zombies and whatever, and also space aliens and spaceships. And actually, some of the early Ultima games,
Ultima 2.
Yes, those did the same thing before he decided, you know what, I should actually have some kind of coherent story to this, rather than just...
His dad worked at NASA, and he watched Time Bandits, and let's put little portals that let you go to different times in my fantasy game because why not? Why not?
So, by the way, for anyone who's interested in like old school computer games at all, I would, very much recommend the Ultima series. You could stop after 7, but they are fascinating, games, and also it's kind of interesting because it was before it became a big thing, but he did see some of all these video games are causing violence and Satanism and whatever. And he Richard Garriott, who made these games, said, I don't agree with them, but they're not 100% wrong. And so, starting with number 4, he decided to try to incorporate moral questions into his video games. And actually, in let me see, Ultima 4, when was that? And actually in Ultima 4, which came out in 1985, like he incorporated a kind of moral system to rate your actions and how you behaved relative to that system was a very important part of the game.
Right, which of course is 100% taken from AD&D, where every time you leveled, you got rated on how correctly you were playing.
And so like
he was only just catching up to AD&D, man. It took him a while.
Oh well, yeah. I think his first versions of his games were like, he was trying to code these out, and he called it like AD&D version number such and such, right, before he finally produced one.
He had access to a mainframe because of his dad, and he actually went through, I think, like 28 some odd iterations of his game before he got something even close to working. And so when the Apple came out, this is why I'm jealous of Richard Garriott, is because when the Apple II or the Apple computer came out, he already had this vast reservoir of programming experience. And so when he saw the Apple computer, he was ready to leverage it immediately. And so between having D&D as the template for like what to shoot for, and then having all that programming experience, he was able to create games as very nearly independent, completely independent. It wasn't until Ultima 4 that you really had this giant team of programmers hustling to make something. So he hails from a time when a single programmer or a couple of programmers, like say Crowther and Woods, for instance, could really sit down and make something that almost everyone at the time would play. And so it's much more of a personal expression than a lot of what came after it.
Well, and the other thing I was going to say about Ultima 4 is like the way he addressed the kind of moral questions. Honestly, it's a lot more interesting and sophisticated than most video games that have some kind of moral component today. Like, they've lost ground compared to what he was doing then.
Interesting.
Because in all of them today, it's like, okay, you can do good thing, you can do bad thing. Like, here's this choice. You can be super mean, or you can be an angel. But in that one, he's like, okay, you can shortchange this old blind woman. You can get away with that, but although I'm not telling you right now, that will have consequences later. But it's not like, oh, you can beat the old blind woman and take all her stuff, or you can, supply her with, food and, shelter for a week. You're not a devil or an angel.
What blew my mind was that you didn't just roll up a character and then start playing. And even in like an Ultima 3, I think you had like sort of a point build system there, and you could pick your racing class. And so it was very much like, yeah, I want to make my man and I want to go fight some battles, right? In Ultima 4, you sit down and you are faced with a series of dilemmas, of moral dilemmas, and you have to choose. And then after you go through this series of questions, it gives you your character based on how you answered these questions. And it's just like, what are you doing, man? What are you doing?
And the other thing, and part of the reason that setup is so cool, is that how he does that is in each of those moral dilemmas, you have to choose between two good things. You have to, so like, your friend is going to visit a hospital where there are a bunch of sick children. Do you go with him and entertain the children with tales of your great deeds and valor, and that would be like compassion, or do you keep your mouth shut out of humility and not draw attention to yourself? So it's compassion or humility. It's two. You have to choose between two good things, which, guess what? That's usually how the real world works.
It's often enough between two bad things.
Now, my concept of a moral dilemma is do you light the orc babies on fire or do you drown them?
You light some wood. You light some wood on fire. You put the orc babies in a pot of water. You set it on the fire and see if they can figure out the water is getting hotter. Or that's frogs. Same thing.
Well, Jeffro, I don't know if you've been tracking this, but you've got to be careful what you say about orcs these days.
Oh, whoops.
Nate, have you seen this?
No.
Oh, there was, I forget where this came from, but there was, some, oversensitive little, twerp was like, we should talk about how the portrayals of orcs in, fantasy games and stories is hearkening back to racist and colonialist tropes about people of color. No, we really shouldn't. Shut up.
Yeah, I wish that literature from 1900 to 1940 was more colonialist. It's very much a vector uh, through which the West was made to doubt itself, to,
Noble savage.
to doubt the, uh, the, the 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 superior qualities of its culture.
Yeah.
It didn't, it didn't really, um, it didn't embrace itself at all. It didn't really gloat about its position at all. It was very, very much a period in the same way that from 1940 to 1980, you have a questioning of of um, what is a hero? Is anybody really a hero? Shouldn't don't heroes have flaws? Don't they have feet of clay? You have that sort of buzzing going on. Just presaging people's people were just on the verge of losing the ability to imagine a hero during that era. In in the from 1900 to 1940, it's more like, what are we even doing here anymore? What's all this for?
In Robert E. Howard's Conan stories, there's always this like, oh, civilization is weak and corrupt and decaying, and you have the strength of this barbarian. Which it's kind of weird because I remember in the introduction to a collection of his I read not long ago. They were talking about like he really didn't embrace kind of that noble savage theory, but you could definitely read that into a lot of his stories. And so yeah, I can see the kind of thing you're talking about there. It's
yeah, it's not the full-throated endorsement of colonialism that people make it out to be at all.
Well, and as far as I know, in modern stories, modern 20th century and on, orcs started in the Lord of the Rings. Is that right? Were they his creatures?
I think they were.
In
The Hobbit it was goblins, but of course Tolkien invented all the languages first, and the Elvish word for goblin is orc. So goblins before Tolkien, it's sort of like how elves and dwarves were different before Tolkien too. Like you talk about elves, in the 19th century, it's going to be something small, right? But yeah,
like shoes or something.
Orc is definitely, yeah. That it's Tolkien, but he didn't invent fantasy.
Yes. As much as there seems to be a good deal of collective amnesia these days.
The World of Warcraft, though, presenting orcs as if they're sort of like Native American type things or tribal people. That to me is just absurd. These are fantasy creatures, right? These are fantasy creatures, and in D&D, an orc is just this utterly monstrous thing that has that they don't need to have a culture. Like what impulse is it that wants to invest in monsters a human culture at all? They're here to destroy your soul. They're here to like rend and maim and like eat babies and stuff. They're a persona, a manifestation of evil. They're not meant to represent anybody, right?
Well,
but if you can't imagine good and evil, objective good and evil, then what becomes of your monsters?
Well, that's the thing, is that it used to be, tearing people limb from limb and eating babies and all that, automatically made you the bad guy. These days, it just makes you a leftist. So, I mean, that's the thing, is that it's exactly right. So now they want to try and be the monster. Vampires are sympathetic. Dragons are just out there protecting their own. Orcs are noble savages, even though we don't believe in such a thing. And it's all these heroes are actually evil because they're out there just murdering them all.
Yeah, and I can tie this back to Clark Ashton Smith's stories, the 3 of which I read just before this show here. There is a spiritual dimension to his stories that is lacking in a lot of stuff that comes later. In Empire of the Necromancers, the dead do not want to be desecrated, and the necromancers get their comeuppance at the hand of these dead people who have been brought back to life by them. In the Isle of the Torturers, there is literally a fate worse than death that is presented at the climax of the story, and getting a normal death is like really the win, the way to win in this one. And not so much the Carnal God, that one's got it's got some seriously real monsters and seriously scary cults in it. And yeah, that's not a town you want to go back to. That's not a town you want to visit in. It's a town you're gonna leave as soon as you figure out what's going on. But yeah, the vertical dimension is what separates a real authentic culture or deep storytelling, and really especially your leftists, what we think of as your leftists, the promise was that if you turn away from this superstition, that all kinds of good things are going to happen. Everything bad in the world is because people have these superstitious ideas about this vertical dimension of reality. And if we can just tune that out, then everything's going to be great. The reality is that everybody that adopts that viewpoint, they literally become brain damaged and cease to have imagination at all.
Well, and that actually, now that just
other thought leaders are 80-year-old men spouting 100-year-old garbage.
Well, so there's 2 things that just made me think of. One is if you like we're saying, if you lose a moral dimension of storytelling, if you lose a clear moral basis for for judging actions, if you say if you make do not judge the first commandment, let's put it that way, then you lose just an enormous toolkit for telling a good story.
What's your struggle? Why struggle?
And the other thing that reminds me of something from Sarah Hoyt, who this is a quote from one of her blog posts. She says, "Grey goo, in which characters of indeterminate moral status move in a landscape of indeterminate importance toward goals that will leave no one better or worse off, is not entertaining."
No, and that do not judge thing, which is very much synonymous with the boomer ethos from after World War II, is when it became crazy. Like, why are you judging your weird neighbor? Like, he's not hurting anyone. But really a healthy society terrorizes its freaks and keeps them in their place, or else everything falls apart.
Can I quote you on that?
Absolutely.
There's that actually reminds me of what's his there's Seabury Quinn. which does not sound like a real name, but that is apparently his actual name. Seabury Quinn has a set of stories about a detective. Oh, what's the guy's name? Jeffro, do you have this?
Oh no.
Okay. You want to find these then, because I think you'll like them. Seabury Quinn has a set of stories, and these are on some of these, or at least are on Gutenberg, I'm pretty sure. Jules de Grandon, that's the guy. And
That's a name.
okay, Jules de Grandon is the character. And he's a French doctor who also happens to end up, being a, quasi supernatural detective. But in one of his stories, they run across these people. Like, there was these people who, I forget what the nefarious scheme was, but they weren't even. It ended up they weren't even human, and they were preying on the people. Probably from the nature of these stories, probably some innocent young girl, because that's who he ends up saving. Because it's a decent pulp story. So, what else are you going to do?
What other stakes really command your attention?
Anyway, but there's this, couple, and, there were some odd things about them that were visible, and then it ended up that they were, eating human flesh or something, I forget. And, he says, Jules de Grandon, the detective, ends up saying, Americans are tolerant. Too tolerant. And they let these foreigners come among them, and they don't question what they're doing. So
wait, a couple visibly inhuman, strange, and then preys on women. This guy wrote a story about some Frenchmen messing around with the Clintons.
And then Jules de Grandon committed suicide with 2 shots to the back of the head.
It was tragic.
Okay.
But somehow the guy didn't have his fingerprints on it. Strange.
The other thing, and you were saying, again, when you lose, a clear moral foundation, also, your imagination just, falls apart, which actually reminds me of, going from early 20th century pulp fiction to mid 2nd century scripture. Romans chapter 1. For although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God nor gave thanks to him. But their thinking became futile, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools, and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images made to look like a mortal human being, and birds and animals and reptiles.
Yeah, and that is definitely fulfilled in 1970s science fiction and fantasy, where authors and editors fell all over themselves to create stories that presented scenarios where the protagonists would find some reason to break a taboo. And by the 70s rolled around, all the taboos were done except incest at that point. And that's exactly where they went.
Robert Heinlein went there. I know.
And now it's come out. Tanith Lee went there as well. It was just the times. And really as far as that destroying your imagination goes, Ursula Le Guin's The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, of a notorious award-winning story. The people of the story cannot imagine resisting or foiling an evil people who are torturing children. They just can't imagine it. And so the heroic, as expressed according to Ursula Le Guin, was to not intervene, to not necessarily participate, but to just walk away. Just walk away while this horrible injustice goes on and on and on and further into the depths of its depravity. And this is not just a story, of course. This is what actually went on at the science fiction conventions of the day.
I haven't read it. I do not know if I have a strong enough stomach to read it. But
it's
actually no. That's the thing. It doesn't prohibit it in horror. It's not that nasty to read. It's hey, imagine this perfect place.
No.
Really
I was talking about something else. If you want to know, apparently, in some pretty awful detail about that, there is a book, The Last Closet, by Moira. What's her last name? Moira Greyland. Okay. And she was the child. She is the child of two well-known science fiction authors, who, I can't even say it right now.
Mary Zimmer Bradley.
Yeah.
And Walter Breen.
And they abused their children pretty horribly. And if I understand this correctly, among a lot of the science fiction, circles at the time, this wasn't really a secret.
No. When word of this was threatening to break out, Robert E. Heinlein was aghast that anyone would sell out sort of the brotherhood of bad science fiction people that are doing bad things. Isaac Asimov is this. This is the mind-blowing thing. His son. Now Isaac Asimov purportedly died of AIDS. Presumably from a blood transfusion, but draw your own conclusions. His son had the largest collection of pornography in California.
Not just the
child
the very illegal kind. Yeah.
Yeah, the largest collection of child pornography in California. And when he went on trial, he was let off. The judge that let him off was Robert Mueller.
Prosecutor? Was he a judge, or was he in some other role?
Oh, in some capacity, he's the one that saw to it that he got no consequences.
Okay, I need to go. I need to go do some long range marksmanship practice, and maybe book some trips. Anyway.
Okay, I just threw out one book. I may as well, mention another that I haven't read, but I have an idea what it's about. The Day of the Rope, which I might have to read sometime soon.
There are a number of people that should have days on a rope.
That's, as far as I understand it, that's kind of the premise.
That's why I like Westerns. The bad guys tend to get just shot. Hey, how'd that shake out? They shot him. How about that one? They shot him. How about that one? They shot him. How about that one? He actually threw a table at the guy and broke his neck. Oh, what happened to his sidekick?
And then shot.
No, what happened to his sidekick? Oh, well, when he got hit with the table and his neck broke, he jerked the shotgun and blew that guy's head into the ceiling. It was fantastic.
Okay.
What about that guy? They shot him.
Which is why they hate Westerns, right? That's why they hate Westerns.
So absolutely. I think we've covered the poem pretty well. Jeffro, did you have any last thoughts on Zothique?
I've had 100% my say.
Okay. Nate, how about you? Still not your thing.
No, still not. But yeah, I've said all I needed to say. Honestly, I said everything I needed to say in my first rant, and I've been trying to be a productive conversant since then.
Okay. Well, in that case, I will take us off, and thank you guys for joining me tonight, and God be with you.
And also with you.
Adios.